Strong is strong, and it doesn't really matter how you get there. Now, when I make a statement like that, I'm not saying literally it doesn't matter how you get there, that everything works, and that training, programming, and so on and so forth doesn't matter, because that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that if a person is strong in general, they are going to be strong in general. Because a lot of people have these ideas out there that because some people maybe are just good at one lift and not good at anything else, that nothing carries over to other things, or because people have good leverages for one lift or technique, that they're not good at anything else, or that a person who might be good at power lifting or at strength lifting or Olympic lifting and really strong at it, that that's all that they're strong at. Right? That's what I mean, is that people have these misconceptions, when in reality, the truth is any individual exercise is really only comparable on that exercise to someone else on it. And there's also a reason why in all strength sports we measure multiple exercises, right? Only in single event sort of competitions does anyone actually only do a single lift against other people, because we are all built differently. There will always be people out there who are very, very good at just one exercise, right? And they can't necessarily do anything else. Or they might be really good at other stuff, but they won't be great at other stuff. But in general, as you get stronger, for the majority of people, if you have relatively balanced leverages, some strength will always carry over to other things, and strong is strong. And in other words, you guys see me through this video doing different forms of deadlifts and stuff, right? These things carry over to other stuff, because a pull off the floor is still a pull off the floor. Does that mean that they are equal to each other? No, because the same individual on one form of pull from the floor might be able to pull 700 pounds on one lift and only 450 on another, right? And understanding how these lifts are different can give you an idea of that. And I mean, a perfect example, the easiest pull I can think of from the floor that anyone might do would be like a high handle trap bar. Not the low handle, the high handle. There are people who deadlift 700 pounds on a high handle trap bar who can barely do 500 pounds on a conventional or a sumo deadlift. And it has to do with both the leverage advantages you get and their own leverages. But you can still build strength off of both. In other words, if you got really strong at any of those three, or at all three, you're probably going to be decently good at pulling off the floor. Although people would argue that people who only do the high handle one might actually be a bit bad at the very bottom, because they have muscles that are not going to develop, that are required to break it off the floor. So they might not be particularly good at a deadlift from the floor for the full range of motion. So that's usually our only real exception to those sort of rules, is that the excessive partial work doesn't always carry over to a full range of motion on a movement pattern. But let's come back over to the point. If a person trained nothing but the high handle trap bar their whole life, and they walked over and did a conventional deadlift or a sumo deadlift, they would be much, much, much stronger than the day they started. They would have a much stronger deadlift than someone who's never lifted weights. Conversely, if we take any of these upper body lifts, let's say we take something like a bench press. If you have a person who maybe learned how to bench press, they spent a few months training. Let's say you take a gym noob and they train for 3 months and they get their bench up to a respectable one plate bench. They can bench one plate aside. And they just stop bench pressing. And they then spend the next year getting really strong at their squat and their deadlift. I'm just using these as examples. I'm not saying that this is what anyone should do. But if they simply spent the next year training their squat and their deadlift and doing whatever it took to get strong at the squat and the deadlift, doesn't mean that's all they do, but they say they do other lifts that carry over to those, and they put all their efforts into that. And this person gets at a year and a half of training, and let's say they can squat 365 or so for a double or a triple. They can deadlift 405 for a couple reps. They haven't touched any pressing. They come over and bench press. What's going to happen? Every coach already knows what's going to happen. Even if they can't outbench what they were able to do on their first time, Give them 2 weeks of doing the bench press. What happens? Person's probably going to bench like 185, 190 in some cases. Within a couple weeks of doing the bench press again. This is a person who, because of a year worth of really hard training on lower body dominant, full body exercises, because they started doing it while they were still relatively small and weak, they're transferred to the upper body. Their upper body will actually gain some size and strength. Their nervous system will have gotten good at straining against heavy loads. The person's bench press will go up. Even if it doesn't go up in the first session, that's because they have to relearn the movement pattern. And as soon as they have the movement pattern down, they will progress rapidly on it. Why? Because strength is strength. Because what is strength? Strength is the production of force against an external object. And when we get into a lot of these discussions, people forget that when they try to say, well, I don't consider this or that to be strength. Well, it's irrelevant what you consider to be strength. Strength is the production of force against an external object. Nothing more, nothing less. That is what the word means. How much force can you produce against an object? Right? That's it. And it tends to carry over relatively well to some extent. I'm not saying it's not specific because strength is specific, but these things do carry over. What usually determines your strength on a given exercise is going to be leverages, which is, again, technique affects leverages. Technique is probably only affects leverages. It's about the only thing it really does, but that can be worth a lot of weight. Right? We have leverages, we have the amount of muscle tissue you have, and we have how rapidly you can deploy and employ that muscle tissue towards producing that force. That's basically your factors. That is 95% to 98%, something in that range of the amount of strength and what you can lift on a given exercise. Okay, that's the vast majority of it. That more or less determines it within a small margin of error. Those are your factors. And the stuff that throws people off could be people's freak leverages. Because you'll see someone like Kaler Woolham, who everyone says, well, his deadlift is just crazy. Well, he's got really long arms and he's built for the deadlift. Kaler's good at the other lifts. He's good at them. But is he great at them? No. He's strong. But he's not phenomenal. He's not proportionate to his deadlift. Well, he's built a deadlift. And that's why in various strength sports we measure multiple exercises. Because you're always going to have a person whose bone structure is really, 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 really geared towards a single exercise. Most people are more balanced than that. Doesn't detract from what he's done. The guy's still in a deadlift class all his own. Like there's no equal to him. Not really. There's a couple guys out there. But realistically speaking, in terms of the deadlift, nobody really out there. And if the guy were to put another 20 pounds of muscle on, his deadlift would probably be the greatest deadlift in the history of the world. Very, very quickly. He wouldn't have any competitors. But I don't think the guy's going to juice it up hard enough to put 20 pounds of muscle. It's not going to happen. But the point is you have stuff like that. But then by that same token, let's talk about how strength carries over also. Take someone like Kokolov. Got a guy like him, phenomenal strong. You got a guy who can clean and push press 405. Now that's not even a competition lift for him. The guy's cleaned and push press 405. The guy doesn't bench press. And I think what people had said at one time, and this is believable, that he walked over and managed to get over a 400-pound bench press really without training the exercise, just walking over and doing it. Well, it's because strong is strong. And when you have a person who can clean 405 off the ground and just push press it over their head, not even a jerk, but a push press, a lot of the same muscles involved with the bench. It's a guy who's got so much explosiveness and strength overall. And again, we're talking about a genetic freak. But genetic freaks are strong, and that's the point. They have strength through their whole body easier than other people. Well, that carried over to the bench press. He didn't learn amazing bench press technique. He's just really, really, really strong and explosive. And that's the point I'm making with some of this, that people need to understand when they try to say, well, I don't really consider this or that to be a display of strength. Well, sure it is. How does it compare to other people doing the same thing? Strength is strength. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.